a Norwegian author and well-known worldwide for 6 autobiographic novels titled My Struggle and multiple prize winner. Karl Ove Knausgaard has been described as one of the 21st century's greatest literary sensations. Thank you for tuning in to the Global Novel. I'm Claire Hennessy. With me today is our returning guest speaker, Dr. Bob Blaisdell. As I've introduced him on the show before, he is professor of English at the City University of New York's Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn. He is author of Creating Anna Karenina, Tolstoy and the Birth of Literature's Most Enigmatic Heroine, and another book titled Chekhov Becomes Chekhov, The Emergence of a Literary Genius. Hi, Bob. Welcome back to the show and happy holidays.
Hi, Claire. Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you too.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your new publication titled A Conversation with Karl Ove Knausgaard, published by the University Press of Mississippi this year. So interestingly, when UP Mississippi recommended you to be on our show, and I was like, wait a minute, I know this scholar. We actually interviewed him before on Tolstoy. So I know, Bob, you are enthusiastic about Tolstoy's work, particularly his autobiographical aspect in fiction. Our previous chat about Tolstoy's creative struggles while writing Anna Karenina was fascinating and enlightening as well. You've often mentioned on the show Tolstoy's influence on writers and the writer's block concept, right? Now, connecting Tolstoy to Knausgaard, both have this captivating way of turning life's ordinary moments into something compelling with their eloquent writing style. So why Knausgaard this time? What draws you to recommend Knausgaard to your students, friends, or colleagues? And what makes his writing stand out for you, especially in comparison to Tolstoy's works?
I'll start with Knausgaard being for me a way for 21st century literature to come alive again. I read a lot of 21st century literature. Most of the literature I read, I admit, is 19th century. And I've read most 20th century authors, most famous 20th century authors. But for the 21st century, there was nobody in fiction that I had to read. I felt like I had to read besides Junot Diaz, the American Dominican writer, and Karl Ove Knausgaard brought me back into the excitement that I think 19th century readers would have had as Tolstoy was writing his novels, as Chekhov publishing his stories. And what he was doing was completely different from anything else anybody this century has done. He created a lot of excitement, and he didn't imagine. Knausgaard did not imagine that this experiment, this My Struggle autobiographical fiction would be a hit. He thought it would be a very niche publication in his native Norway. But because it's so personal, because he used, for the most part, everyone's real name, including his own, there was excitement in Norway before the publication, and he thought, "Uh-oh, this is going to have a lot of readers." And I don't know. I think in Norway, it was something like 10% of all readers in Norway was reading his book, and it got published. It got translated within the next 2 or 3 years into English and other European languages, and it continued to just excite the world. He thinks it was very fluky, accidental. It wasn't his ambition to write a world famous novel. And I came to the novels a little late. I started reading the essays, the short essays in the Seasons series. And those led me to the 3,600 pages of My Struggle.
Tell us about Knausgaard himself. If you were to introduce him to our listeners who haven't read him yet, how would you describe his ability to transform his own life into art? And especially, how does he craft his personal experience into works of artistry that resonate with readers?
You're right, that he turns what seems like just an ordinary life, and that's what he's saying. His his ordinary life, being a son, being a brother, being a husband, being a father. Um, he doesn't seem to exclude any part of his life, and yet he turns ordinary, our everyday life, getting up to make breakfast for the kids, um, and it's seeming to be unselected. Like this is not like a special moment. It's just one moment, one day where he's making breakfast, um, one day where he's dropping the kids off, one day where uh, he's bringing um, one child to a library sing along for other 2-year-olds. Um, and so to relate it back to Tolstoy, Tolstoy made for me as a young man realize that anything could be written about, anything could be the basis of literature with a kind of focus. And painters make us feel like that, make me feel like that too. It's like, why is this image of a woman pouring milk so captivating? Why does it make me feel like it's worth being alive? Um, and Karl Ove describing, in some way, it is like a painter, and that even when the portraits are self-portraits, he's not really interested in himself. He's interested in, this is what a person is. Is this what life is? And so it's not a memoir. It's not about what I remember and what's important to me. It's some way just using what he had available to him, and all the barriers that he had as an artist, as a novelist, because he had long stretches where he couldn't write, years, where he could not. Writing was so important to him, and he'd get himself time and place to write. He went out to an island shortly after his first child was born. He spent, I don't know, 2 months alone on an island. And his wife is wondering, what the hell? We just had a baby. But writing was so important to him. He's out on this island with 3 other people on the island, and he couldn't write. And he said it was only when he started this experiment and he decided not to exclude anything, even if he was writing about his father and his childhood, even if he was writing about how he and his wife fell in love. The present day, if the present day intruded on the writing, the present day was part of the writing. And that was revelatory and exciting for me, and seemed distinctive.
Right. I really like the metaphor you used to compare his writings to a kind of self portrait. And I think that really captures well the essence of his creativity. Also, what I heard from what you just said is this kind of existentialist description of life and transformation of ordinary life to art. Speaking of which, a lot of his characters' name remained the same in the book, and he didn't change them whatsoever. And of course, this gets him lots of backlashes from his family members who actually sued him, right? I wonder if you could say more about that.
Sure. So when the first volume of My Struggle is about the death of his father, um, and his father had a messy, unhappy, very, what Karl Ove sometimes calls it, a slow suicide. where he just drank himself to death. And Karl Ove's uncle, his father's brother, did not like, read the novel before it was published and threatened the publisher that he was going to sue them. And the death was not like that. And Karl Ove accepted that, well, maybe it wasn't like that, but that's what I remember as I recreate it. That's what, and it turns out later Karl Ove got confirmation from like the paramedics who came, the people who helped, outsiders who witnessed the death or confirmed the death, that it was just as he had said or worse. So Karl Ove's uncle and other family members, some of them don't talk to him anymore, but it's his life, and it was his life transformed into art, his life transformed into a novel. It brought up questions about, well, would you want your whole life discussed? And Karl Ove decided that it was okay. He was sorry if it hurt anybody's feelings, but that was the material of his life. And after all, he came off, he thought, worse than anybody. There's nothing, he wasn't trying to make points, score points off anybody. He was just, again, using his life as literary, artistic material. So despite the controversy, despite the threatened lawsuits, none of the lawsuits resulted in anything. And as with a lot of controversies, it just made it more interesting for people people were more curious about. With Uncle's protest inspired more book selling.
Why do you believe Knausgaard's novels have garnered such wide acclaim, both in his homeland of Norway and internationally? Are there specific historical or cultural circumstances that have contributed to his meteoric rise as a literary figure? Or do you think the resonance of his themes aligns with the desires of readers in various markets?
And that's a good question and very complicated. So I'll start with the simplest part, which is I think there's many in his literary history and artistic history. There's been undiscovered in their lifetime. The artist wasn't discovered. He wasn't appreciated. The writer wasn't appreciated. I think his material in My Struggle was so extraordinary, so brilliant that it couldn't be suppressed. It just he thinks it's fluky. He thinks he doesn't understand why and how it happened. He thinks it's just a kind of accident. But I think with certain kind of artistic talent, Mozart and Tolstoy, Cézanne, it just comes out. It's recognized in its own time, and he was recognized at this time when really I for one, and I think many people who are devoted to reading, had given up on that there was going to be anything new in 21st century literature. There was just going to be good material, interesting material. This was something completely different, and powerful and uncontainable. And so I think took the world by fire because the world hadn't seen anything like this.
Well, what's the essence of My Struggle? What captivates readers about this novel, particularly after delving into the first volume that entices them to explore the subsequent volumes?
Um, I think I think it's the endlessness of everyday life. I think it brought back everyday life, it brought back for me my appreciation of how special everyday life is. Um, how on reflection and recollection, um, everyday life can be, and again, in the same way as Tolstoy made me feel like, even though this is very particular people who I don't know in a different time and place, his people are in sometime in recollection, but often of the very moment. But they're living in a different country, different circumstances. They seem very familiar. So making these remote places and events seem as ordinary and familiar as my own life. Uh, he sometimes talks about just being a 16-year-old boy um, is, and that's the focus, maybe the third volume. A lot of the focus of the third volume is 16-year-old Karl Ove. Is very similar to a 16-year-old's experience in Chile, a 16-year-old experience in Korea, a 16-year-old boy's experience in Afghanistan. There's 16-year-old boyness, which is part of what he's getting at, and I think that readers have responded to. And across, and not some, even though he is who he is, women have responded just as strongly to this figure. He's been accused of being kind of super masculine, but he wonders about that because so much of what he's revealed about himself and understood about himself shows also his feminine sides, his peculiar vulnerabilities. The boy who cried, his taste for fashion. He's very fashionable, conscious of its looks. So he doesn't think of himself as manly. He's embarrassed by his unmanliness. So he's seen as a particularly manly figure. He's very handsome. He's very personable, tall. So in the interviews, you do take in his physical presence, even just for me on Zoom when I talk to him.
Right. And well, I know, Bob, you are a noted short story writer as well. So which part of the novel left a profound impression on you, resonating deeply, either in your role as a writer or as an avid reader?
He's had the biggest influence on my writing. I'm embarrassed by how I'm embarrassed and also grateful for how he's opened up parts of writing to me where I couldn't get free of a kind of fictional voice. And through reading My Struggle, I think I figured out how to get away from the false voice, or the voice that I immediately recognized was not all the way to where I wanted it. There was just this fictional haze over everything. And so he talks about, one thing he repeatedly talks about is the writing he doesn't he's not somebody who rereads his own work and appreciates it, but he is someone who, once he found his way of writing with My Struggle after his first two novels, um, he um, he pushed speed so that he wouldn't block himself. He was so self-critical that the only way he could get past his self-critical mind that made him worry about phrases and words was to go really fast, to write at least 10 pages a day. And if he had to write 20 pages, he would write 20 pages a day to finish. So I interviewed him twice while he was working on his latest series of novels, which are fictional, deliberately fictional, and not as interesting to me, but it's important. It was important for him, I think, to show himself that he could make things up, that he could use a different canvas than his own life. But he would write 10 to 20 to 30 pages a day because he had to finish the 800 pages in a year. 800 pages. And to write fast, and I'd already known or felt something like that as a writer, that for some reason things went better when I didn't hesitate, when I just ran forward and thought and let things happen as they happen. So I'm grateful to him for opening that to me and showing me that it does work. An effective way around writer's block is to go really fast. You just have to fill up the pages.